Hello and welcome back to the channel. On today's tutorial, I'll be sharing with you a 2-in-1 requested video. First requested video is how to draft a deep neckline on the bust corset, and the second tutorial is how to draft a corset back without boning and a loop. So if it's your first time viewing my channel, please hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for supporting my channel. So let's start. So I'm gonna ahead to mark my shoulder to bust, on the bust, waistline, and 4 inches for my basque. So you can decide to use 3 to 5 inches, but it shouldn't be more than that. If not, it's going to be too deep and very uncomfortable. So next, I will be marking my neckline. For my neckline, I'm marking 3 inches by 3.5 neckline depth, and I'm just going to go ahead to place my French curve, and I'm going to draw out my neckline. So after I'm done doing that, I'm going to go ahead to place my tape, and I'll mark my shoulder circumference divided by 2. My shoulder is 14 divided by 2. I have 7 because I'm attaching sleeves to this pattern. I'm going to add ½ inch, making it 7.5. From that point, I'll come down by 1 inch and draw my shoulder slope or shoulder slant. So after I'm done drawing that, I'll just go ahead to outline it. So after outlining it, I'm going to go down and I'll place my tape, mark my chest line, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, and I will draw a straight line at that point, indicate my chest line. So from this line, whatever I have at the shoulder, I'm going to measure it and mark it down at my chest line. From there, I'll place my ruler and I will draw a straight line. So the next step is to divide what I have at my chest line. So I'll divide that into 2 and I'll mark. From that point, I will be going in by ½ inch, and from there I'll place my French curve to draw my armhole. But before I do that, I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4, which will be 7 as a guide, and I'll connect down to my chest line and go ahead to connect to the upper part of my shoulder slope. So after I'm drawing that, the next step I'll take is to mark my dart intake. So first, I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5. I'm going to mark it at the chest line, bust line, under bust, and waistline, and also go down to my basque. Then after doing that, I'm just going to go ahead to place my ruler, and I'm going to draw a straight line connecting it down to all the marks that I have made. So after I'm done drawing the lines, the next step I'll take is to mark the dart. So on both sides, I will be marking 1 inch. So for a plus size person, you're going to be marking 1.5 inches on both sides. So I'll mark 1 inch on both sides of my basque, waistline, under bust, and I'll go ahead to connect a straight line with my ruler and my pencil. So after doing this, I'll just go ahead to use my marker to outline it so that it's going to be more visible for you to see. Next is to draw my cup, and I'm going to start from my bust point to connect it down to my under bust this way, and I'll flip my French curve and I'll also connect at the other side of my cup. So after doing this, I'll just go ahead to connect it back with my marker so that it's going to be visible. Since it's an underburst corset, I'm going to outline the underburst line. So this is why it's called an underburst corset. The corset is starting from the underburst. Now moving up, you're going to decide where you want your neckline to start. I'll place my tape at my chest line, mark 2 inches from there, and I'm just going to draw this line. So that will serve as a guide, and I'll go ahead to extend my nipple to nipple line upwards. So now the next step I'm going to take is to create my neckline. So for the neckline of this particular dress, you'll notice that is a bit deep and it started at the underbust. So at the underbust, I'm going to mark ½ inch, and from there I'm going to connect down. But before I do that, I'll just go ahead and mark about 1 inch on both sides for my dart, and I'm going to use my French curve to connect. You can also use your straight ruler to connect at this point also. So after I'm done connecting at this part, the next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and use my marker to outline the cup area or the dart area of this pattern. Now you're going to decide the neckline of this dress, and it is a deep sweetheart neckline. So I'll just go ahead and use my pencil to draw it out a bit, then go ahead to use my French curve. So if you don't have a French curve, you can go ahead to use your freehand sketch to also do this. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that at this point with my French curve. And this is what I have for this part. So next we're going to draw the cup for the other side, and to do that, remember we took out 2 inches dart, and what I'm going to do is I'll replace that 2 inches that I took out from that part. And the reason why I'm doing this is that so that by the time you cut out that part on your cup, it's going to outline with what you have at the yoke part. So I'm going to go ahead to draw this other part of my cup, and I'll just go ahead to remeasure before I do that. So I'll just blend in, just in case you don't understand. If you blend in at this part, it's going to align with your yoke at the other side. So I'll just go ahead and go down a little at this part, and I'll just draw out and extend my line. So after I'm done connecting, this is what I have, and I'll just go ahead to outline it out with my marker. And I'll also go ahead to outline the other parts of my cup also. So this is what I have at this point. After outlining, I'll just go ahead to outline the armhole area of the yoke part. So I'll mark my bust circumference at the chest line, measure my dart intake mark, and then replace the sewing allowance. So whatever I have at the chest line, I'm going to place it back at the bust line. From there, I'll go ahead and reconnect my armhole for this pattern. Next, I'm going to blend in the yoke part of my dress to draw my neckline. So before I did that, I made sure that that point was meeting, and I went ahead to connect, and I marked this part as yoke. Next, I'm going to mark my underburst circumference divided by 4, and after I'm done marking that, I'll go ahead to measure the dart intake, replace the dart intake, and mark my 1.5 inch sewing allowance. At the waistline, I went ahead to mark my waist circumference divided by 4, measured my dart intake, replaced it, and I went ahead to mark my sewing allowance. So whatever I have at my waist, I extended it at my basque. So we are going to be cutting off the lower part of the basque at that point, so it is not needed. So I'll just go ahead and I will connect all my lines that I have marked. Now to draw the basque, I'm going to be coming in by 1.5 inches, which is my sewing allowance. Why I'm doing this is so that my waistline is going to meet at the back. So to draw my basque, another way to do that is to blend in your darts. So I'll just go ahead and I'll fold up my pattern to blend in my dart if you just want to mark your darts directly. And when you're doing that, make sure that all your lines are meeting, like your waist and underburst lines are meeting. So after doing that, I'm just going to place my ruler, and from that 1.5 inches I came in, I'm going to go ahead and draw my basque. So after drawing it out, this is what I have. So the next step I'm going to go ahead to do right now is to cut out my pattern for the front. So after I'm done cutting out my pattern for the front, this is what I have. Next, we'll be moving to the back pattern. So I've gone ahead to mark out all my back measurement just the same way I did for the front. And this particular back, the only difference is that the neckline is 3 by 2.5 inches, and I'm not going to be using a zipper for the back pattern. So I also have a requested video of how to make a corset back without boning and also with a loop. So on this particular video I'll be doing that also. So this is more like a 2-in-1 requested video. So after that, I'll just mark my shoulder to bust with 1 inch for my dart intake. So after marking that, I'll place my tape, and I'll also mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2 for my dart intake. So this is where my dart is going to start at the back, unless you want to slit your pattern into 2, but most times I blend in my dart. And for this particular pattern, we are not using a boning, and I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2 at my underburst and at my waistline. So at that point, I'll just place my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line. Next, I'll be taking a dart of 1/2 inch at both sides, but I mistakenly took 1 inch, but I'm going to still correct that later. So I'm just going to go ahead to take it to that line I made, which is my shoulder to bust plus 1 inch. So I'm just going to outline my dart intake also. So I'll go ahead and extend this line upwards. So that is for people that want to slit their pattern into 2. And after doing that, I'll go ahead to outline my chest line. That is where my yoke for the back will be starting. So on the pattern, I'm going to place my tape at the chest line. I will mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'll mark my sewing allowance. So there's no dart intake at the bust line. So I'll go down to my underbust, mark my underbust circumference, replace the dart intake, and I will mark my sewing allowance. And at the waistline, I'm going to mark the waist circumference, go ahead and measure my dart intake. And that is when I noticed that I took more than 1/2 inch on both sides. So I went ahead to reduce my dart intake. So after reducing it, I'll go ahead and mark my dart intake, and I'll just mark my sewing allowance. So after marking that, I'm just going to connect my measurement starting from my bust point. So what I have at the chest line, I'll take it down to my bust line, and I'll go ahead to connect to my underbust, and from the underbust I'll take it down to the waistline. So after I'm done doing this, I'll just go ahead and use my marker to outline so that it's going to be visible for you to see. So the next thing I'm going to do is to create the part for the loop at the back. So I'll go ahead and measure 1.5 inches. So you can use 1 to 2 inches depending on what you want. So I'll measure 1.5 at the upper part and at the lower part, and I'll go ahead to use my ruler, and I'm going to connect, drawing a straight line. So at this point, I'm just going to use my marker, and I'm also going to outline it to make it more visible. So I'll just create like a small loop design to show you that that part will be having a loop. So going back to the upper part of this dress, I'll be marking 1 inch at the neckline, and from there I'll just create like a small design at the back. So you can create any design you want at the upper part of your yoke. So after that, I'll just write this as yoke of the dress, and I'll label this as 1 and 2. So with this, my pattern is ready, and the next thing I'm going to do is to cut it out. So I'll go ahead and I will cut my pattern. So you can go ahead and blend out, or you can cut out the dart at that point. So after cutting out my pattern, this is what I have, and with this we have come to the end of the tutorial. Please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thanks.